My name is Jack, and I'm a collector of antiques. I have a natural inclination toward objects with obscure histories. The more time shrouds them in mystery, the more fascinated I become. It was the autumn of 2017 when I received a call from an old friend, a lover of the desert and its adventures, named Miles. His voice was charged with a strange enthusiasm. He told me he had found something priceless at a secret market on the fringes of the Sonoran Desert. He said it was an illegal underground auction held once a year in an undisclosed location where everything rare and dangerous was sold. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity, my eternal curse, led me to accept his invitation. We set off in an old four-wheel drive, tearing through dirt roads that vanished beneath sand dunes until it felt like we were sailing an endless sea of nothingness. The silence was absolute. Nothing but the distant hum of the engine and the crunch of sand under the tires. We arrived at dusk, as the sky turned into a massive orange ember. The place was a gathering of black tents, emanating smells of incense and strange spices. The atmosphere was thick with secrecy. The faces of the attendees were partially covered, and their eyes followed you like shadows. The auction began. Artifacts from all over the world were displayed: cursed swords, mummified, deformed animals, and tattered manuscripts. I was on the verge of boredom until the final piece was brought forward. It was carried by a tall man, his skin so dark it seemed he had stepped right out of the desert's heart. He held a small wooden box carved with symbols unlike anything I'd ever seen. They weren't hieroglyphics or cuneiform, but something older, more primal, like the scratches of a predatory beast. Everyone fell silent instantly. Even the wind stopped blowing. The man spoke in a whisper that everyone heard. "This is a prison, built by the ancients to cage what cannot be killed. What is inside is not a spirit, it is a hunger." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but my hand trembled with an overwhelming desire to possess it. The bidding began, the offers faint and hesitant. I raised my hand with an exorbitant price, and in the blink of an eye, the box was mine. As the man handed it to me, his pitch-black eyes piercing my soul, he said, "Never open it after sunset. The darkness strengthens it." I returned to my car and placed the box in the back seat. Miles was silent, a look of regret on his face. We drove off, heading back to civilization, but the road seemed longer than it should have been, as if the desert was rearranging itself. Night fell abruptly, a pitch-black darkness untouched by moonlight or starlight, as if a black curtain had been draped over the world. The car stopped suddenly without reason. The engine died, and the lights dimmed. In that heavy silence, we heard it. A knock, faint, coming from the box in the back. I looked at Miles. His face was pale, even in the darkness. In a trembling voice, I said, "It must be the heat, the wood expanding." But the knock repeated. Then it became 3 successive raps, followed by the sound of something scratching the wood from the inside. A slow, deliberate scratching. Worse than that was the sound accompanying the scratching. Breathing. Deep, slow breathing coming from inside the tightly shut box. Panic began to seize me. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the car door to examine the box. The air outside was abnormally cold, and the silence was as heavy as water. I shone the light on the box and saw the carvings. Changing, yes, changing. They were no longer just scratches, they were forming words in a language I couldn't understand, pulsing with a faint blue light like veins. Another knock, stronger this time, made the box jump in place. Miles screamed from inside the car, "Throw it, Jack, throw it away." But something stopped me, a sick curiosity, or a feeling that it was already too late. I took out a small key that was tied to the box's lock. I don't know why I did it, but I inserted the key into the lock. One click, and the box cracked open by a gap no wider than a centimeter. In that moment, the flashlight died, and I felt a presence in the darkness around me. It wasn't something I could see, it was something I felt, a mass of pure hunger. The hunger seeped from the box, a sense of absolute emptiness, of unquenchable thirst, of an insatiable desire to devour. Then I heard the whisper, a whisper coming from everywhere and nowhere, filling the vast desert. Hungry, so hungry, we will eat. I slammed the box shut and jumped back into the car. Miraculously, the engine started. I floored the gas pedal and the car shot forward at a maddening speed. We were silent, gasping with terror. After half an hour of insane driving, the lights of a small town appeared. We stopped at an abandoned gas station, its pale blue neon glow bathing the area in an eerie light. I looked at Miles. He was crying. He said to me, "You fed it, Jack. You opened the door, and now it knows us. It knows our taste." I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Suddenly, I noticed something on his arm. A scratch, very faint, 3 parallel lines, as if made by a tiny cat's claws. He said he felt it when we were in the darkness. Since that night, we haven't had a single peaceful sleep. The scratch on his arm grows clearer day by day, and on some nights when silence falls, I hear a faint whisper in my ear and feel the same hunger I felt in the desert, a hunger that never fades. I eventually sold the box to another collector, but it came back to me. How? I don't know. I found it the next morning at my apartment door. The desert never forgets, and the hunger inside it is never satisfied. My name is Elena, and I'm a photographer specializing in harsh natural landscapes. The desert is my sanctuary. I find an unmatched beauty in its desolate solitude. In the spring of 2019, I decided to take a solo trip to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, specifically to the Yardang region, those bizarre wind-carved landforms that create mazes and rock towers resembling a ghost city. My goal was to photograph the singing sand dunes, that eerie natural phenomenon where the sands emit vibrations that sound like moaning, but what I heard there was no singing at all. I arrived at the area 2 hours before sunset. The scene was surreal. Gigantic, grotesquely shaped rocks stood like silent guardians, and the shadows elongated terrifyingly. The air was completely still, not even a single breeze. I pitched my tent in a narrow corridor between 2 rock walls, thinking it would protect me from the wind. I was about to set up my recording equipment when I heard the first sound. It was a faint noise, like a long sigh, but it didn't come from the sand. It echoed from among the rocks, as if the rocks themselves were breathing. I ignored it at first. The world of geology is full of strange sounds. But the noise repeated, and this time it was closer and more like a whisper. A multi-layered whisper, as if 10 people were whispering at the same time in a single, incomprehensible language. Curiosity mixed with a touch of anxiety stirred in me. I grabbed my portable audio recorder and stepped out of the tent. The last daylight was fading, leaving the sky a deep violet. I followed the whisper. It led me through the winding, identical passages like a maze. The rock walls on either side of me were so high they blocked out the sky. The deeper I went, the clearer the whisper became. I started to distinguish words. No, not words, but my name. My name. Elena! It was a long, agonizing pronunciation, as if a throat not made for speech was trying to utter it with difficulty. Then I heard another sound. A heartbreaking sound. My mother's voice. My mother had passed away 3 years prior, and her voice is etched into my very core. I heard it calling my name from a distance, filled with sorrow and pain. Elena, come to me. I'm lost. I froze in place. I knew it wasn't her voice. Logically, I knew, but my heart nearly burst from my chest. It wasn't just imitation. There was real pain in it, pain extracted from the depths of my memory. I ran back toward my tent, but the whispers followed me, surrounding me from all sides. Other names, buried memories, all emanating from the rocks. I reached where I thought I'd pitched my tent, and it wasn't there. The tent was gone. My bag was gone. Every trace of me was gone. I was in a completely different spot. The moon had risen, casting a pale light on the shapes of the rocks, making them look like faces. Faces in a state of eternal screaming, mouths gaping wide but without sound. But I understood then. Those mouths weren't screaming, they were absorbing. They were absorbing sound from everything. I noticed the dreadful stillness. There was no sound of my footsteps, no sound of my breathing, not even my heartbeat, which was racing in my chest. I scooped up a handful of sand and let it fall. It made no sound. I checked my audio recorder. It was on, but the sound level meter remained completely dead. The place doesn't allow sound, it devours it. Those whispers were the only sounds permitted because they were a lure. A new kind of terror gripped me, the terror of nothingness, the idea of being swallowed alive by total silence. I pulled out my phone, no signal of course, and turned on the flashlight. The light was weak, as if the darkness here was denser and was fighting back. I walked aimlessly, trying to escape the whispers that were now calling different names, names of strangers, perhaps previous victims of this place. Mikhail? A whisper from afar. I'm here. A reply from the other side. Then I saw it. At the end of a narrow passage, an opening in the rock resembling a cave. Inside was a faint, pulsating blue glow. Curiosity mixed with desperation pushed me closer. The silence was so absolute I felt my eardrums straining. I squeezed through the opening. Inside, the sight was horrifying. The cave walls were polished like black mirrors. On them were reflections. Not my reflection, but reflections of other people standing and staring at me. They moved independently, their faces distorted with terror. I realized they weren't real reflections, but images trapped inside the stone. Their mouths were open in silent screams, beating on the rock from the inside with their fists. In the center of the cave was the shape. I can't describe it. It was like a curtain of shimmering air, forming and dissolving, taking on the features of my face for a moment, then shifting into my mother's face, then into many faces I didn't recognize. It was as if the entire place was a single living conscious entity, feeding on consciousness and sound, and the whispers were its bait. I understood the rule then. Don't make a sound or you'll be trapped forever, your image locked in the mirror, your consciousness turned into a whisper to lure the next victim. At that moment, a scorpion stung me on the ankle. The pain was sudden and excruciating, and before I could stop myself, a loud scream escaped me, a real scream, not a whisper. I felt it vibrate in the still air, echoing in the cave. Instantly, I felt the curtain turn toward me, focusing on me. The black mirrors on the walls began to flicker, and the faces inside all turned toward me at once. Then I felt a pull, as if something was dragging me from my chest. Not my body, but something inside me, something closer to my soul. I ran like a madwoman. I wasn't thinking anymore, just pure animal instinct of a frightened creature. I ran through the branching passages, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. The pull intensified whenever I slowed down. Finally, I saw a star in the sky, a narrow gap between two walls. I threw myself through it and fell onto the sand outside the rocky maze. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, which I'd left kilometers away. All symptoms of the scorpion sting vanished, leaving no trace, but something stayed with me. Since that night, I've lived in near total silence. I can speak, but my voice no longer sounds like my own. I hear it muffled, distant, as if coming from behind a thick glass wall. And worse, on some nights when all is still, I hear new whispers coming from inside my head, new faces calling new names, and sometimes I hear my own voice, whispering my name from somewhere deep in the Gobi Desert. Perhaps from a rock I left behind there, waiting for its next victim. My name is Omar, and I'm a telecommunications engineer. My job is mostly dull, but it takes me to remote places which I love. In the summer of 2021, I was assigned to inspect a malfunctioning communication tower in the vast Nafud Desert in the north of Saudi Arabia. The tower served a huge area, completely empty of inhabitants, but vital for aircraft and caravan signals. They told me the fault was simple, probably a generator problem or a frequency adjustment. What I found there had no technical explanation whatsoever. I set off alone in a company vehicle packed with equipment, fuel, and water. The road was long and straight, cutting through a sea of golden sand under a blinding white sun. The landscape was beautiful in its monotony, dune after dune and a few clouds on the horizon. I reached the tower site after 4 hours of non-stop driving. The tower was tall, a red and white metal structure standing alone like a witness to the modern age in the heart of this ancient desert. I got out of the car, blasted by merciless heat. The place was completely silent, a deep and heavy silence. I noticed something strange immediately. The sand around the tower's base carried no traces of life whatsoever, no insect tracks, no lizard burrows, nothing. As if a perfect circle around the tower had been sterilized of any living existence. I opened the generator housing. It was, as I expected, broken. But the problem wasn't just mechanical. There was a strange kind of corrosion on the copper wires, as if they'd been melted and refrozen in a chaotic pattern. Not from the desert heat, but something else. I repaired the generator, started it up, and power returned to the tower. The warning lights started flashing again. I went to the tower's base to check the frequency panel, and there I saw the thing that froze my blood. On the metal panel there was a handprint. Not an ordinary print, but a handprint, very clear, burned into the metal. The flesh and skin had left a dark residue, as if someone had placed their hand on a metal plate heated to incandescence, yet the panel was cool to the touch. A chill ran through my body. I looked around. The desert was empty to the horizon, sand, sun, and sky. Nothing else. I decided to finish my work quickly and leave. There was a glitch in the frequency software, so I sat in the car, opened my laptop, and began the remote reset process. It would take several minutes. While I was absorbed in my work, I felt a slight jolt on the car. I looked up and glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing. Then another jolt, stronger, from the rear of the vehicle. It was as if someone was pushing it gently. I spun around quickly. No one was there. Wind, I muttered to myself, but there had been no wind. I got out of the car to reassure myself, walked around it, and checked the sand. There were no footprints except my own. Nothing out of the ordinary, but a strange feeling came over me, a sense that eyes were watching me, not from a distance, but from very close, like right over my shoulder. I returned to the driver's seat and felt for a moment a resistance closing the door, as if something was holding it from the outside, but I pulled it hard and slammed it shut. I continued working on the laptop, the screen reflecting an image of the car's rear console. As I stared at the screen, I noticed something in the reflection, something black, swaying, standing behind my car a few meters away. I whipped around to look out the window. Nothing was there. I looked back at the screen. There it was again. It was a shape, no, not a shape, but an absence of shape, a patch of absolute darkness, roughly humanoid, but too tall and unnaturally slender, its limbs far too long, standing with an unnatural stillness. It was about 20 meters away now, watching me. I lost my mind. I turned the engine on, put the transmission in drive, and floored the gas pedal. The wheels spun in place, sand flying into the air, but the car didn't move. There was a sound of grinding metal, as if something was holding the car from behind with immense force, lifting the rear wheels slightly off the ground. I looked in the side mirror. Beneath the cloud of dust, I saw something. There were two hands, long and thin like dry branches, a faded black color, gripping the car's rear bumper. The grip was so strong, the metal was slightly denting. I let out a muffled scream and turned off the engine. Silence fell, a terrible silence, broken only by my panting. I waited a minute, then two. Nothing happened. I took out my phone to take a picture, but the screen was distorted, full of static and lines, as if a very powerful frequency was interfering with it. That's when I remembered the handprint burned into the metal and said to myself, "This thing draws energy." I prayed silently and gathered every ounce of courage I had to see. I grabbed a crowbar that was in the car and opened the door very slowly. I stepped out. My legs were shaking, but I made my way toward the back of the car, the crowbar raised above my head. Step, step. I reached the rear corner and looked. There was nothing. The sand was empty. The bumper was slightly damaged, but no one was there. I breathed a massive sigh of relief and almost laughed at my frayed nerves. I turned to go back to my seat and found it right in front of me. It wasn't meters away anymore, it was centimeters away. It was much taller than me, so I had to tilt my head up to look at it. Its face was level with my eyes. It didn't have a face, just a smooth surface like a chalkboard, reflecting the sunlight in a distorted way. Its body absorbed light, and standing before it, I felt an intense cold. Not an airy cold, but a cold that pulled the heat from my bones. Its smell was the worst thing. Not decay, but the smell of a place utterly devoid of life. The smell of silence and nothingness, like the air of a tomb sealed for centuries. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound, but it extended its very long hand, slowly toward my face. The movement was deliberately slow, as if it was enjoying my terror. Its fingers ended in claws. No, not claws, but sharp extensions of black bone. And in the moment those fingers were about to touch me, the power to the tower suddenly cut off, a loud humming sound, then a pop. The generator I had fixed malfunctioned again. The creature stopped. It turned its head toward the tower, then back to me. I felt a wave of anger or hunger emanating from it. Then simply it slid. It didn't walk, it moved with a swift gliding motion away from me toward the tower and disappeared into its base. Not inside it, but into it, as if it entered the tower itself. I didn't wait to see more. I jumped into the car, started the engine, which worked this time, and sped away. I drove 100 kilometers before stopping to catch my breath. I went back to the main office and told them the tower needed a complete overhaul, but I didn't tell them what I saw. I quit the job a week later. The problem is, ever since that day, I've noticed malfunctions in all my devices. My phone battery drains in hours, and my new car suffers from electrical issues no mechanic can understand. On some nights, I wake up to find handprints on the windows. From the outside, I'm not sure, but maybe what I messed with that day made it follow me. The desert gives nothing without a price, and I took its meal from it. Now it's looking for compensation.